Hello, Internet. My name is Chamomile,
And I'm Requiem.
and we're going to jump
We were talking
right
about
back
the
into the
meta
meta plot.
plot.
Yeah, let's.
So Reign of Winter is one of the few adventures that has a bunch of different ways it can end. Because at the end, you get a boon from Baba Yaga, and Baba Yaga is a mythic character, which is their terrible attempt at doing epic levels.
In
And you can,
fairness, every attempt at doing epic levels has been terrible.
yeah. uh, and she can give you some pretty setting altering stuff. Like you can end the winter in Irison, I think is the name of the country.
I
You
believe that's
can
correct. Yeah.
become the rulers of the country. There's a bunch of stuff that could happen. One of the options was you can make Anastasia. Yes, that Anastasia. I'm Anastasia Romanov, the new queen of Irison, which makes no sense on any level. And I think of all the things that Baba Yaga could have done, like that was the one that no party was going to pick. So guess Cam, who is the queen of Irsid in Pathfinder Second Edition?
Well, obviously, they use some kind of vague title, like the way that the Baldur's Gate would use Balespawn, or the way that Bloodlines would use the Fledgling, so that it can refer to whoever the character, the PC that you installed in Irison at the end. And in fact, they probably refer to them as the Sovereign of Irison in order to keep things maximally vague. I mean, that's obviously going to be a popular choice. It's going to be either that or Ending Winter will be easily the two most popular choices. And if you don't want Winter to be canonically over, then, I mean, you shouldn't have made that an option. But since we did, you should at least have the other potentially most popular choice be the canonical option, which is that one of your own party members is and remains the Queen of Irison, obviously. Pathfinder wouldn't be so foolish as to walk right past that, would they?
Anastasia Romanov is the queen of Irison.
Wow, so I guess literally everyone had Anastasia Romanov in their party. I guess that's fair. That's weird, but
Like that option was so dumb. Like I don't even know why it was presented in the first place. Like yes, technically in Pathfinder canon, she is the granddaughter of Baba Yaga, so is technically a potential heir to the throne. But she's from the real world. Like it, she has no magical abilities. Maybe she does in Pathfinder Second Edition, though that would also be stupid. But she has no experience with Irison. Their native language is Russian. She's an Orthodox Christian. Does that make sense as being the ruler of Irison?
Yeah.
What you should have brought in the real world into this in the first place, which goes into a whole nother Pathfinder about real world stuff in Pathfinder, which is Pathfinder's bizarre hatred of atheists.
Which is weird because atheism was real popular during Pathfinder's heyday. I guess it was a reaction to that. They're being ironic hipsters about it. Like, oh,
So
you're an
first of all,
atheist. How mainstream. Not that it was
the
actually
first thing
mainstream,
is,
but...
like, originally they had the canonical afterlife for atheists is like, you're like imprisoned by Pharasma or like destroyed by her for not believing in your soul or something. There's like 2 or 3 atheist countries that are all evil. Which is like, it's dumb. Like, yeah, they persecute the religions, but there are evil religions in Pathfinder. A lot of, like, half of them at least are evil. So, like, wanting to go and ban religion, is, kind of makes sense, especially when they're explicitly evil religions. Like, they worship the god of pain and suffering. Like, and like, it's not like in the canon of Pathfinder, that's not some like slander against them. It's literally the god of pain and suffering.
Right, yeah, like, openly. They self-identify as that.
Uh, and then you got the fact, well, at some point, some of the dinosaurs are like, well, atheism world things were included, but it's like, you include the real world, and you, by default, included atheism.
I
And
mean,
while
and
well,
including the real world, to be clear, is a dumb thing to do in your fantasy game. Your
yeah,
kitchen scene, unless you're specifically making Portal Fantasy, where the idea is that the protagonist will be pulled from the real world into the fantasy realm. There is pretty much no other reason. And yeah, okay, sure, there's probably some bizarre edge case, but Pathfinder isn't one of those bizarre edge cases. It is a standard fantasy world, and it should not have a connection to the real world. Every time that's done in a standard fantasy, and it is done a lot, but it's always kind of hokey and dumb.
and like and the other thing is like even in a fantasy session, like literal atheism doesn't necessarily make sense because like in a the gods are pretty interventionist in Pathfinder.
Right.
It makes sense to have some sort of anti-theism where like a person is just like I reject worshiping the gods. They clearly are not in it for what's good for mortals. Like that makes sense that would be some people would make that choice.
Yeah. Like, admittedly, literal atheism is usually pretty dumb in a fantasy setting, where it's like, you know, this is like being a flat earther at this point, where it's like, you might not personally have been in a plain or mountain high enough to see the curvature of the earth, but the documentation on this is so thorough that you'd be insane to say the gods literally don't exist. It's like that Terry Pratchett joke where atheists tend to end up as a pile of ash with a note attached saying, "Yes, we do."
Yeah.
So
But
literal atheism is dumb, but anti-theism can make perfect sense. Yeah.
yeah. But then, and this just makes me, I hate this especially. So there's a devil in Pathfinder that is very clearly inspired by the mysterious stranger, the Mark Twain kind of novel. He made several attempts at writing it, so there's like 5 or 6 versions of it. He never actually finished it.
There's guys there. Oh well.
Which is him making it and that it has been famously adapted into a claymation version where the mysterious stranger shows up as this really creepy claymation masked figure. Not even masked figure, its face is a mask that it holds in its hand.
Yeah.
That is not super famous on the internet.
I will drop a link to that in the description. So, like, pause this video and go watch that one if you haven't already. It is fantastic.
Now, the thing, and this, you don't necessarily learn about this in high school, because in high school you're probably just reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and maybe Tom Sawyer. It's not necessarily super relevant to either of those books, but Mark Twain was an atheist, and the whole point of The Mysterious Stranger was an argument for atheism, and you can even see it if you go watch it's an argument for atheism because the mysterious stranger is a representation of God. The mysterious stranger in that clip is Yahweh. He doesn't care about mortals. He can just make more of them. He's so powerful. Good and evil don't mean anything to him. The whole point of the mysterious stranger is an argument for atheism. So guess what Pathfinder did with their inspiration that was a pro-atheist piece of literature? What do you think they did, Cam?
I mean, knowing Paizo, they clearly would have honored the spirit of the original creator, and broken with their general anti-atheist world building, in order to include a devil who had at minimum, a reasonable and potentially sympathetic, reasons motivating himself, even if perhaps they anticipated he would overall be used as an antagonist. He would at least be used as a sympathetic antagonist who had some legitimate grievances. Clearly. Like, that's the obvious, correct thing to do. Paizo wouldn't mess this up, would they?
They did actually mess it up. So, there's a whole...
Keep getting these wrong. I'm like 0 for what? 2? 3?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. You played it. So, in Paizo's version, so it's just this whole species or subspecies of devils that their job is to promote atheism, to draw people towards lawful evil, which is especially weird since in Pathfinder, all devils serve Asmodeus, who is a deity.
And he's specifically a lawful evil god.
Yes. So they're promoting Asmodeus, who is a god, by promoting atheism, somehow? It's an underpants gnome situation. Promote atheism, question mark. Asmodeus gets power. Like, what? That one particularly just made me so angry because it's like clearly whoever created it understood what the mysterious stranger is about and decided to give it the middle finger. They giving Mark Twain's corpse the middle finger.
Yeah, you could have just not included the mysterious stranger at all if you didn't like it. Which, and for the record, this is exactly how I feel about the Golden Compass. Is that like that book isn't, or that series really? The first book is actually pretty good, but the series overall is not a celebration of science or rational thought or independent thinking. It just really hates Christians so much. And so, yeah, I mean, whenever you create fiction that is just giving someone, and I am most thinking of the third book in the series, because there's a problem that is sort of like occasionally present but easily ignored in the first book, starts to grow out of control in the second book, and then devours it in the third book. Which is, it's... This book doesn't have a whole lot to... it doesn't have anything to exalt. It doesn't have something to say like, Christianity is bad because it opposes this specific other virtue, but rather like it begins with Christianity is bad and then kind of half-heartedly offers some alternatives. Like the scientists aren't very scientific. They resort to Eastern mysticism almost immediately. It's, yeah. So, like, yeah, I in the case of Paizo, it was atheism. But, just to be clear here, it's not that, I am biased because I'm a science-fearing atheist. I mean, okay, I suppose I probably am to some degree. But I am at least, I don't bear any tremendous ill will towards religiousness. I can't do words right now. But yeah, like, it's not that I'm declaring war on Christians and how dare Paizo take the wrong side. It's that they took a work created by Mark Twain that was, an argument for atheism, and they gave that work the middle finger, and it's like, why are you picking a fight with a dead man?
And like, the thing is, like, it's a cool short story. The video that they're more inspired by is a cool video. The mysterious stranger in the video refers to him as Satan, but I think if you want to make the mysterious stranger, like a mysterious stranger type monster in your game, you obviously make it a fae. The mysterious stranger in that video seems very fae-like.
Yeah. If you're using anything remotely similar to the D&D conception of fae versus fiends, you could have a version of this where a world which has a mysterious stranger who is a demonic entity because there simply are no fae. Or, perhaps fae and demons are the same thing, essentially. It might even be that there is a political division between fae and demons, but, so that, fae and demons could be like essentially political parties or political factions based on their relations towards mortals or between the side they took in some primordial war of immortals or whatever. Like, there's ways you could do it where it would make sense that the mysterious stranger would in fact be a demon. But if you're stuck with the standard D&D division of things, which Pathfinder is and has been since inception, then you can't do that.
And like the aesthetics of the mysterious stranger in the video are very like David Bowie Labyrinth or Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, kind of Venetian Renaissance aristocratic thing that I feel like really works with the fae more than devils. Like, I love the image of a person who is just, they have a mask, and the mask is their face. They're just holding their face in their hands. That's very fae.
Yeah.
Sort of the dream imagery that I think works pretty well with the fae.
Also, briefly drawing attention to this, where is the option to give them the dwarf?
So why does it technically want him?
They lost their slave and they are looking for a replacement.
Oh.
So yeah, just generic evilness. And also because we really needed the Iron Gods adventure path referenced in here. Like, that is such a bizarre adventure path. That's the one with the downed alien spaceship that you can, dungeon crawl for techno loot, which is such a weird thing to add into your fantasy kitchen sink. I could see it being justifiable just on the grounds of being an absolute kitchen sink, but, Paizo specifically says they're not that.
Like, I think it'd be cool to have, like, a, area of the world where there was, like, some sort of, like, more technological empire that I think you make it clockwork or steampunk.
Right.
But then you want, your character, you want to have, like, a tinker class, like an artificer class, who their primary stick is doing, like, stuff with the clockwork/tinkering, clockwork/steampunk stuff.
Yeah, clockwork, steampunk, mage punk, that whole Eberron vibe. That's totally fine. Like, there's ways to make this work in a fantasy context, but I do think that just directly grabbing grays from sci-fi and plopping them down in fantasy and saying they're a crashed alien spaceship, that can work if you're intentionally having sort of a cheesy, hokey kind of tone, but, like, you have to get kind of campy about it to make that work, which they did not.
And I guess they might have been trying to do, like, the heavy metal movie, which is very, like, fantasy and science fiction side by side, but I don't think they really pull it off. And also the technology side kind of devours the fantasy side in that campaign, that adventure specifically. I think Cam has read a lot of the adventure paths. I don't know how many you've read.
At this point, probably about half. And it is, like, I have briefly skimmed over all of them, for sure. But I've probably sat down and proper read about half of them. And even them not, like, word for word, but,
Enough.
Yeah. Like, enough to get the idea, and generally speaking, if I broke off partway through, it was basically because, like, okay, enough of this shit. Like...
Now, the ones you've read, any stand out as particularly good and any stand out as particularly bad?
That is a good question. I will say that, God damn it, I wanted you to get into melee. Oh well. Kingmaker is probably amongst the best. It has a cool concept to it. It is significantly less railroady than the others. It's got a lot more, here's a bunch of cool encounters scattered around a hex map, go find them. Which Paizo never attempted to do again, which is weird because Kingmaker is consistently very popular. There's a reason why this is the one they chose to make a video game out of. I do think Rise of the Rune Lords is actually fairly good for, especially for a first set of adventures. I guess it's not really their first set of adventures because they made some for D&D before, but as an intro to the world of Pathfinder, I think it works pretty well. As much as it's, fairly blatantly copied from the Sword Coast, I think Varesia is actually a pretty good setting. Overall, like, I'm positive there's something dumb about it that I'm forgetting. It's got some interesting villains to it, although it does have the perennial Paizo problem of there's no way for those villains to communicate their backstory to you. Skull and Shackles is a pretty cool idea. You begin press ganged into a pirate crew and then mutiny and take over the ship fairly quick, and then you get to go around having pirate adventures for a while. It's another thing where it suffers from railroading. You know, when you're a pirate, you want to be able to sail around and go a pillaging and a plundering, and instead you have some very specific stuff you're supposed to go and do, which is not great. They do sort of make a gesture that they might go just pillage some random ships, and, you know, here are like 2 example ships they might try to pillage. But there needs to be a lot more focus on that and a lot less on their plot stuff.
That's one of the ones that's a campaign that I would like to play. Pirates. Not necessarily Skull and Shackles, but doing a pirate one would be fun, I think.
Right. There are a lot of... hang on. Aha, here we are. Yes, change your weapon. Can you not? Fine, just shoot that guy then. I'll try changing weapon out of combat, maybe that'll work better. But yeah, there are quite a few Pathfinder adventure paths that have a cool concept to them, and in the introduction to them and in the advertising for them, they sell the idea of a cool adventure. But then they stick very closely to their very rigid formula in execution, even when that premise requires a very different execution. Kingmaker is the only one where they really broke from that path even a little bit with the hex scrawling.
That's their most popular one.
Yeah, and it worked out fantastically.
And they were like, all right, let's never do that again.
Yep.
Despite, I'm almost certain that it's probably their most popular adventure path.
I mean, it's the one that I definitely see groups assembling for the most often. When I started a professionally run paid game for it, it filled up fairly quickly. Partly that was because I had 2 people who were, already from my community, including Requiem, who were interested in it, either just because it was Pathfinder or because they really want the Kingmaker hex crawly conquery thingy. But that was still like 2/3 of the players in that game were external, and it filled up very quickly. So this is clearly a popular concept. People want to do it. That never happens with Pathfinder games. Pathfinder is not nearly as popular as 5e. And also, it's the one they made a video game out of, which, that doesn't necessarily mean it's automatically the most popular period, but...
They are trying to do the next one as Wrath of the Righteous, which I feel like is an interesting choice.
Which is funny, because that is on my list for potentially being the worst. Like, it's hard to sort it into the very best and the very worst, but... once you get into ranking, like a specific, number 1, number 2, number 3 ranking, then you start getting into incomparables. But that's definitely, that one is one of the ones that springs to mind of like, oh, what does a bad adventure path look like? Partly because its big hook is, oh, we're going to epic levels. You don't need epic levels. Level 20 is already absurd. You don't need to go past that. Partly it's because there is that one encounter where the goddess of justice and honor runs a torture game show that just deeply contradicts the concept of justice, as well as, and honor varies from culture to culture. Whenever I analyze this, I usually go with 19th century Victorian honor, because that is the honor, the sort of honor that most people, both working at Paizo and in Paizo's English-speaking primary demographic, are directly familiar with. And it's not like Iomede's behavior reflects much better on her in practically any other honor system. Like, there's probably one out there where what she did was acceptable, but you'd have to go digging for it. Most systems of honor would strictly condemn either her for what she did, or the players for going along with it, or both.
I think part of the reason that the desire to do epic levels happens is the way the game is written. Like the demon lords or whatever their equivalents are always level. The demon lords clearly exist to be, the end game boss of your campaign. But as written, you can only face them with epic levels, and what you would need to do is you need to bump down the pit fiend down to CR 15, and then have CR 20. Your CR 20 fiend always be some sort of unique creature.
I mean, you don't even need to go that far because, bearing in mind, a CR 20 creature is loosely equivalent to one level 20 character. You can totally have CR 24, 25 demon lords who are suitable epic final bosses for an entire party of level 20 characters. I don't know if Pathfinder did this. I don't know what their CR of their demon lords is, but I know that 3rd edition took the CR of demon lords and gods well into the 30s and 40s, which, I mean,
I don't think
don't
they
do
ever
that.
did anything. I think they tended to be about CR 25.
Yeah, CR 25 is actually not bad. That is enough that a level 20 character could plausibly bring them down. Not a level 20 character, a level 20 party could plausibly defeat them, although it would be a absolutely vicious battle, which is probably about what you want for your most powerful creatures in your campaign setting. Which is the way that I've always put this in the 3rd edition days, which, this is since the Greyhawk gods are not as popular as the Forgotten Realms gods in 5th edition. I haven't actually had cause to put it this way for a while, but the way that I would always put it back in the Greyhawk days was there's no reason why Pelor can't just be a Solar Archon with a fancy hat. CR 23 is plenty enough even for a god. Level 20 characters are demigods. They are absolutely forces of nature with powers comparable to that of deities in a lot of cultures. Norse gods considered a bunch of frost giants their rivals. A pack of frost giants, that would be Thor would almost certainly win that encounter, but he would have to exert himself. That would be a challenge. That would be a fight. And 5 frost giants is level 20 characters can absolutely stomp all over those guys. Level 20 characters are about as strong as Thor.
I've heard that Wrath of the Righteous towards the end ends up being a complete cakewalk because of the epic level equivalent.
They are extremely powerful, which on the one hand, I appreciate them being extremely powerful and not extremely weak for once. But it is just, it's not built with a CR system at all, which means figuring out... Okay, so the way Mythic ranks work, right, is that you have your character level, and then you additionally have a Mythic rank from 1 to 10. And so you sort of have a character class that is your Mythic rank class, which is there's a caster one and a martial one and so forth. And it's not clear at all what CR is appropriate for a character based on their level and their Mythic rank put together. The way a character's level alone simply is equal to their CR in Pathfinder. And even in 5th edition, which is not as good at CR as 3rd edition, but 5th edition is better at it. Or 5th edition is better at it than Mythic ranks are, for sure. Just to make sure that's clear. Even in 5th edition, where generally a creature of a certain CR is an appropriate challenge for an entire party of a certain level, that gets you into some weird conversion difficulties where it's makes it harder to figure out what to do with mixed groups. But in fairness, that's always been tricky, and you just kind of have to develop an intuition for it. But yeah, with Mythic ranks, it's what's the difference between a level 10 Mythic rank 1 character and a level 15 Mythic rank 2 character, or Mythic rank, a level 15 Mythic rank 1 character and a level 10 Mythic rank 5 character.
Just not think it through.
Yeah, the answer is go fuck yourself.
I do imagine that this is not that we're seeing ghosts. This is a story in her head to explain what happened. She is writing it in her head. In the early part of the tabletop game I played with Cam, because we had so many players, sometimes it would be Selwyn's turn. She couldn't really do anything just through the placement or whatever. So she ended up either reciting poetry or dancing a lot on her turn. Or occasionally making flower crowns.
Yes. Which I've always felt, I mean, not literally always, I have felt for a long time that running just one character in D&D I don't think is really sufficient. You either need to drastically overhaul the combat system so that it draws more emphasis to what one character can do. You probably want it to be a lot less wargamey and a lot more, what sweet stunt are you doing this time? And either that, or people need to be in control of little mook squads by default, because a war game is just not fun with one person. You need at least 3 or 4. So as the game master, I'm in command of a small or sometimes fairly large army of mooks myself, and my opposition is in total 3 or 4 characters with the different interesting special abilities. Yeah, I know it's locked. I want you to pop it open. You're a bard. You're supposed to be at least a little bit good at this. Yeah, you got 1 billion trickery. Okay, I guess I need a key for this. Fine. But yeah, so as a GM, the war game affect works fine. As a player, though, not nearly so much.
There was a guy in my tribe. He kept walking around listening to voices. After a while, they told him to jump off a cliff. Be careful what you listen to.
This dialogue needed a little bit of a rewrite. I would not use the word guy in a fantasy setting.
I think it works for Amiri. She's very casual.
Etymology works, but it's like, I feel like that's one of those phrases that will take you out of it. I think Sarah Monette called it the NyQuil blue dragon eye problem, where like NyQuil might be the exact correct shade of your dragon's eye, but the moment you mention NyQuil, it's gonna ruin the setting.
Yeah, I don't think Guy has that effect though. I think giving your fantasy characters a more modern mode of speech, so long as you don't reference specific modern things, is fine. One that tends to slip through a lot, and audiences even don't even realize it, is telling people to fire their bows.
Oh, because they would not.
Yeah, what fire? That is an artifact of the age of firearms. Which, yeah, the term you're looking for is loose arrows. But like that's one that goes straight past a lot of people, so you can tell people to fire their bows, and 90% of your audience won't even notice that this is a bizarre anachronism.
You get occasionally stuff where it's like, we have words that are references to specific people, like to Euhemerize comes from, there was a scholar Euhemerus who tried to explain mythology in terms of history. That one's a little, like, probably don't need to use the word Euhemerize ever, but like, only other example I can think of is like sadism, named after Marquis de Sade, which probably doesn't exist in your fantasy setting.
Well, I mean, the idea of a sadist is like, and you get into a weird thing where like there is sexual sadism, which is a weird personal hobby, and then there is the idea of a sadistic ruler or a sadistic bully, where in a less consensual and less sexy context, where it is someone who's just hurting other people for no better reason except that they take pleasure in hurting them.
Yeah.
So the word sadistic in that second sense is very useful to have. But and so and it's sufficiently. It's like most people don't know the etymology of that one. But then there's also like a Caesarean section. That's potentially a Conan was born by Caesarean on a battlefield. But I don't think they use the word Caesarean.
From his mother's womb, untimely ripped. That's Macduff, but
right, that comes up in fantasy stories, is Caesarean sections, but that refers to Caesar, who is someone that people know very well. Like everyone recognizes that name.
And you can't have Caesar salads in your fantasy section. Fantasy setting.
Perhaps I will tell you more. But it doesn't matter now. We need to concentrate on the problems at our doorstep. The Stag Lord, the Druid, the Mist.
Now, I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be Nerissa. That is Nerissa's portrait there.
Yeah.
So she's directing me to kill the Stag Lord, but wait, the Stag Lord is her servant? Maybe they rewrote that.
Guess we'll find out.
The one called Stag Lord was once the victim of a cruel madman who has since become one himself. You see now how monsters are born. What comes of regret for a thing you cannot change? There is no time to be lost. We must do away with the fog quickly. Search the area around the hut. Try to find anything that remained of the druid who lived here. I am sure the fog is history.
And Camille has talked about how in the actual tabletop, Nerissa shows up at the last moment with no.
Yeah. She is briefly foreshadowed in Book 5. Basically nothing in Books 1 through 4. Like, she's mentioned to the GM. She is involved in the Stag Lord's backstory and such. But it's, again, the only interaction the players have with the Stag Lord is to show up at his house to kill him. It is totally unclear how some kind of scene like this, where we get any insight at all into his backstory, would ever happen.
I will be waiting.
So
what was she in the tabletop? What is she using the Stag Lord to do? What is the purpose of him working for her?
She doesn't seem to have any actual plan for him. She's just she just enchanted him for giggles.
I mean, I would criticize that, but Sullivan wouldn't do that. Sullivan did do that, in fact, several times, I believe.
Yes, that must be it. The place of power where the druid created the fog. Perhaps we'll be able to cleanse it from there.
That's like, there was one point where we were trying to impress some centaurs, and so have like a party to show off the wonders of civilization. And I had to figure out exactly how many times I could charm person to instigate love triangles.
There we go. What is this thing? What is that thing?
I think at one point she set up a love triangle between, we had like clerk of Abadar, we had like a rogue of some sort, like a mercenary bandit, and one other person. I don't remember who. But she instigated a love triangle between these three.
Yeah, I seem to remember something like that, but I can't remember the details either.
Camille did tell me that if my bluff got high enough, I would be able to convince people that actually they were gay the whole time.
Yes. Like, it's obviously a fairly supernatural effect, but once your bluff starts getting to, like, plus 30, then, like, a 50 result on a skill check will get you all kinds of weird shit.
Don't even need Charm Person to set up love triangles anymore.
Where is the exit? There we are. So once you arrive here, you can't just turn around and go back. You have to go through the whole thing. And then the exit is kind of out of the way.
So what ended up happening? Did we know what happened to Valerie? Is she just dead?
I don't know. I don't think we killed her. I'm pretty sure she and Tartuccio got away.
Did he turn into the kobold or something?
Yeah. The kobold sicked a couple of his kobold minions on us. It's possible that Valerie went down so quickly I didn't even notice her.
In the tabletop version we did, there was a kobold tribe that we integrated into the kingdom because we kept accidentally causing their nobles to die. It was originally there was going to be a whole thing where like they had their king, but like the king pledged fealty to Selwyn, but like their aristocracy got devastated by our misrule, so we just kind of integrated them into the kingdom directly instead.
Yep.
The early years of Selwyn-topia were a little bit tough.
Wouldn't you like to see the end of times? Serving Ergothola could offer such an opportunity.
Okay, we were talking about Pathfinder gods. One thing that bugs me about Pathfinder... so the Pathfinder gods are clearly trying to do the Greek deity thing, right?
Yeah.
Where they have a bunch of fairly human figures in that they have their own personalities and backstories. And you talked about how a major flaw with that is that their backstories don't interact with each other at all. They have no pre-existing relationship with each other.
Also, they're just not interesting.
Yeah.
They're poorly written.
But one other thing is that... This is fatigue. Let's deal with that. I think we just rested, but I guess we're tired again already. We are marching through forest. Maybe that's it. But yeah, this is a problem that comes up all the time. So it's not exclusively Paizo's fault, but Pathfinder does also do it, is that different gods in the same pantheon are treated as though they are competing religions. It is not how polytheism works.
Should be one coherent pantheon. There should not be 4 different sun goddesses setting. Like how I know there's like at least 3 distinct sun gods in Pathfinder.
There's that.
Goetus, the moon god he worships, is not the god of Pathfinder's moon. He's the god of a different moon.
That is so dumb. But yeah, so we have a cleric of Ergothoa, and then we have a cleric of Grotus, whoever the dwarf is a cleric of. And there is a little camps, which by the way is a cool little thing they have with this game, is there are little camp speeches, camp conversations the characters have with each other. That's a good idea, but one of them was this cleric of Ergothoa trying to recruit this cleric of a different moon to her own faith. That's not a thing. They have the same religion already.
Yeah.
Like, they treat it like it's evangelicals and Baptists or something, where they might plausibly, despite being generally friendly to each other, they might plausibly try to recruit each other away from one another. That's not how it works. It's, in a polytheistic religion, all of the gods are part of the same religion, and you pray to them, you pray to a specific god when you need that god's help. And if you are a priest of a specific god, that doesn't mean that, you think that god is the best, and you want them to, defeat all the other gods and become king. What that means is that you have taken on as your profession the duty of finding out what that god wants, so that, if someone has been, for example, cursed by the goddess Fortuna, that you could go to a priest of Fortuna and figure out what Fortuna wants and how you can get yourself uncursed. Unfortunately, the entire priesting profession has really imploded. You can never find priests for anyone but Jesus these days. So
I mean, I started playing D&D because I assumed Dungeon Master is basically priest of Fortuna, but you have not been helpful on this front.
I mean, she showed up during the Kingdom Hearts playthrough and apparently didn't like me, so... I keep forgetting to switch him to his...
Like, we talked a little bit about this subject in the Bloodlines playthrough, but like you definitely want to integrate make them feel more like a pantheon. Like Yomade was a human priestess of Sarenrae, but you also have like Urgathella was actually Pharasma's daughter. She didn't like the cycle of life and death, so she created undeath as a way out for mortals, and that has led to a falling out between her and her mother. Something like that.
Yeah. Concealment? What by? Guess the giant frogs just carry concealment around with them? They are primal. It's probably some kind of template. And I guess because of the way that concealment works in Pathfinder, increasing our accuracy won't actually help us get through it at all. But at least if we're more accurate, that means we get to make rolls against concealment more often, I guess. So it's sort of in a roundabout way does help. Because the way, and for anyone only familiar with the video game, the way that concealment works in Pathfinder is that first you roll to hit the enemy, and then if you hit them, you make a second separate roll against the concealment. And if you fail the concealment check, which is just an unmodified D100 roll, then you miss anyway if you fail that one.
Yeah, it's delightful.
I mean, yeah. It's not clear to me why concealment doesn't just boost someone's AC.
Ready for anything.
There we go. Having Kieran shoot things from a distance feels wrong to me. I completely redid this part of the game for the...
I don't even remember what this is supposed to be. This does not seem familiar at all. Are we attacking? Is this where the Stag Lord's going to be?
No. Do you recall the ruined temple where the had the portal to the Autumn Court in the Feywild?
Yes. Oh, yes.
So yeah, I drastically overhauled this encounter.
Feels like this does not seem familiar in the slightest. Yeah. I don't remember the exact circumstances, but we found this elven ruin, and it was inhabited by a bunch of undead, which we had to battle through so we could find a portal to the Autumn Court and ally with them. There was the dancing lady. She was a Bavanshi, if I recall correctly.
Yeah,
not spelled like that.
Something like that.
That was where Chamomile learned the wonders of Celtic spelling.
Yeah.
This should do it.
I like how this guy comes equipped with a trident by default. It's also his cleric subclass has cannot wear armor. That's part of the trade-off of his subclass, which makes his casting stronger, so is ultimately, the good move to make, particularly on easy baby mode, where nothing can hit me anyway. But he still gets like a robe. How do we get him to take his shirt off?
Yeah. Are we gonna have to find a mod? Is there a shirtlessness mod?
I mean, there had better be, because generally speaking, as a matter of principle, I have nude mods installed on every single one of my games, up to and including Minesweeper. So,
So we get to this ruined temple. We negotiate with the dancing lady. I think we fed her a bandit archer because we had so many of those because the rest of the party insisted on recruiting every group of archer that showed up.
yeah, the way that I had,
which I was like, was not a good idea.
the way that I had
They were like,
revised
yeah.
the kingdom management rules is that people would show up to join your kingdom every so often. I did not mean to move that. My mouse is on the fritz. Oh well. Yeah, okay. She can still shoot, so that's fine. And the idea here was supposed to be that, like, oh, you might not have enough. You might not get them in the right proportions. You might have not enough farmers, especially early on, where farmers were relatively rare and like bandit mercenaries were relatively common, because you were basically still just a pack of outlaws building a village. So that's the kind of people you drew in. And so, you might not have enough farmers to feed all the bandit archers that were showing up. You might not have enough artisans to, enough blacksmiths to maintain the weapons and armor in order to turn those bandit archers into infantry or cavalry who would actually be helpful. But the party insisted on hanging on to every single bandit archer that came along, even though they couldn't upgrade them into better troops, even though they were just constantly redlining their food, and even though they had very little actual use for them.
And by the party, let's make it clear that I was also, this is another thing getting outvoted on.
Right.
A calculated risk.
It's like, this is way too many people for a love triangle.
Unworthy.
I see your light.
I hope he wasn't important.
It's fine. Are we sure this is a bear-like treant? Could it be a treant-like bear?
Well, we won't know until we kill it, get it on a slab, and do some science to it.
It's almost dead, so... We need to help out that twink it killed.
This will hurt.
There we go. Step 1 complete. Now somebody find a slab. Oh, hey, you're alive again.
I swear, never have I been so glad to meet a stranger. Even with the power granted me by Sarenrae, I almost lost.
Almost?
Have my thanks.
No, you did lose.
I need to introduce myself.
Like, you attempted to hit it, and you missed, and then I came and saved you. You're welcome.
And Sarenrae, yeah, she is the mercy and healing goddess.
Sarenrae fanatic. Talk about people I'd be just as happy not seeing for the next 1,000 years.
Alright, take your shirt off.
To myths, but I believe that is accurate. Creatures occupy
Let's see the abs.
far from ordinary animals. The power that moved them here is related to the fog. The beasts hold the fog as anchors hold a ship dancing in the lake.
3 clerics seems excessive. Like, you get that you want a... Part of me gets you want the good, neutral, and evil cleric, but I really think you could have just had, like, a neutral cleric that doesn't care, or even like a neutral cleric and a paladin or something.
Yeah. Anyway, the dwarf sucks, so he's the one who's getting booted. You keep saying almost.
I promise to think about your request after you deal with the beasts. Please, allow me to catch my breath for a moment.
Are you sure?
I will wait for you.
Kieran could heal you with his tongue. That's one way of delivering a touch spell. Doesn't say what part of your body you have to touch him with.
He's like Steven Universe. He has healing spit. That's what it is. That's the reason.
Alright, these are hopefully the last ones.
Oh, it's a primal ferocious wolf as opposed to a regular.
I assume those are templates, so it's just got 2 different templates slapped on it.
Wretched things.
Can't wait to get rid of the dwarf. He is the Donald of this game. So one thing that Pathfinder does that doesn't work in tabletop, but actually does work in a video game, is they have... What just happened? Oh, she got tripped.
Oh, that was worrisome.
Yeah, I was like, she was at full health. What the fuck? But no. She is just prone.
I did that on purpose.
But yeah, Pathfinder has a lot of abilities that are a certain number of rounds per day.
Yeah, really frustrating.
Yes, do that. Stand. Okay, she's up. But yeah, like in a video game where the computer is doing all the bean counting for you, that can work. But in a tabletop game, you want to do it the way that they did in 3rd edition, which again, it's something that Pathfinder made worse from 3rd edition. So it's like they had a perfectly good model to work off of here, and they messed it up a little.
They needed to make it. They were trying to make a bunch of fiddly changes to Distinct, and that's one of the ones they came up with.
Yeah. So in 3rd edition, the way they did it was that you had a certain number of uses per day, and then each use lasted a certain number of rounds. And so, you might be able to rage for 10 rounds at a go for, 3 times a day. And then, Paizo turned that into like 15 rounds per day. Which...
Another thing they did that was annoying was like, so they increased the number of feats. So that was good. That was a good idea. But then a lot of the feats they broke up into pieces. So that meant you were essentially, you had a net, it was a net neutral because you
Yeah, you had a higher
got
number
more
of
feats,
feats,
but you
but
have to
you
take this,
had to take a higher number of feats to get the same benefit.
which means it's actually a step back because there are more failure points because there are more choices.
Fog should weaken and eventually clear entirely.
So it was a net loss. It could have been a net gain, but it was a net loss.
You've saved my life, and I wish to repay good with good. I will gladly aid you in your journey. Let us be off.
So we're gonna have a good clerk and an evil clerk, and I guess I guess we've got 3 clerks on our party already, so we could have so we're gonna take out the dwarf. So we're gonna have a good clerk, an evil clerk, and Kiernan is neutral something.
I mean, he's neutral evil. That's
No, I'm pretty sure he's neutral good. In the game, in the tabletop game, he was neutral good, like all Kelpies are.
I mean, alignment is bullshit. So if we're getting into like what alignment is he really, then the answer is, but like the mechanical alignment I picked out for him was neutral evil. For whatever difference that makes, hopefully not very much.
Drowning people in a river is very neutral.
I don't discriminate about who I drown. Completely neutral.